Hey folks, tonight we're diving deep into the heart of ancient Rome, not for victories or politics, but to uncover something darker and way weirder. Rome gave us roads, aqueducts, and laws, sure, but also some of the most absurd, over the top punishments that still haunt ancient history. So before you get comfy, take a sec to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually dig what I'm doing here. And drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is. It's always cool to see people tuning in from all over the globe. Now, lights off, fan on, gentle breeze in the background, and let's relax into tonight's journey. The Vestal Virgins who got buried alive the high price of purity in ancient Rome. These Vestal Virgins were basically the national Wi-Fi back then. If they went down, chaos exploded everywhere. They were picked before puberty to serve Vesta, goddess of the eternal flame. Their job, keep that flame burning forever, and most importantly, stay far away from men for 30 years. Breaking the chastity vow in Rome wasn't just a slap on the wrist. It was like dropping a nuclear bomb in the Senate. If a Vestal got caught having fun, the punishment was burial alive. Yep, alive, not a metaphor. No dodging the sentence, no timeout in the corner playing good girl, but actually shoved underground and sealed up. Why bury and not just chop her head off like a regular punishment? Simple Romans believed no Vestal blood should spill. That would tick off the gods. So they came up with a freaky solution. Dig a hole, drop her down with a dim oil lamp, some stale bread, a little water, because, hey, hydration matters. Then seal it tight. Voila, no blood, no mess, no angry deities. Poor girls left in the dark, reflecting on life choices. While Rome breathes a sigh of relief and moves on, think the guys caught with her got the same burial? Nah. They usually got beaten to death in public. Still brutal, but quicker. Honestly, being a Vestal was a huge honor. Front row seats at the arena, fancy chariots, even the power to pardon a condemned prisoner with a single word. But with one catch: mess up once, and you're sleeping underground forever. And yeah, Rome took that seriously. There was a famous Vestal named Cornelia, accused under Emperor Domitian before her execution. She shouted, "Does Caesar think I've been sleeping with a god because no mortal man ever touched me?" Strong words. Didn't save her, though. So, if you're stressed at work, just remember at least your boss isn't threatening to bury you alive with stale bread and a dusty oil lamp. Rome, where HR policies were etched in stone and fear had a name: Poena Cooli, or death in a sack with your animal buddies. Oh yeah, ancient Rome, birthplace of philosophy, architecture, and punishments straight out of a fever dream. Now, Poena Cooli means punishment of the sack. No, not some weird medieval game show. This was reserved for the ultimate no-no, killing your own dad. Romans didn't just fine you or toss you in jail. Nope. If you whack your father, they had a deluxe package waiting you and 4 unlucky animals. First, they'd tie your hands behind your back, giving you a moment to reconsider your life choices. Spoiler alert, you screwed up big time. Then they'd sew you into a giant leather sack. Sounds cozy. Right, but wait, there's more. Inside the sack with you a dog, because you clearly lack loyalty. A monkey for some extra chaos. A snake to slither through your regrets. And a rooster, probably to crow at your doom come dawn. Then this stuffed nightmare got tossed into a river, preferably a deep one. The result, a horrific mix of screams, barking, hissing, and sheer panic cruelly poetic justice. Nobody's exactly sure why those animals got the invite, but historians think they're symbolic. Dog for family, monkey for chaos, snake for deceit, rooster for vigilance, basically your sins brought to furry. Scaly life. Can you imagine being stuck in that sack, the monkey banging your head, the snake wrapping your legs, the dog going nuts, and the rooster acting like it's just Tuesday? If you call that the worst escape room ever, you're not wrong. Nobody's wrong here. This punishment was rare, thank the gods, but Rome pulled it out occasionally for showmanship. Usually under emperors who loved a good theater. It wasn't just crime control, it was a performance, possibly scarring a few poor spectators. So next time your dad makes a lame joke or forgets your birthday, be glad you weren't born in Rome. Back then, killing dad didn't mean therapy. It meant a river ride with a snake circus. Now, about crucifixion, but flipped upside down, turning the whole misery script on its head. When we hear crucifixion, most of us picture wooden crosses, slow, painful death, and a warning to anyone thinking of messing with the state. It's Rome's signature punishment, brutal, public, and humbling. But only Rome would get a little creative sometimes. Enter upside-down crucifixion. Yep, hanging head down. Because apparently dying standing up just isn't humiliating enough. This was reserved for special cases, usually people the government really. The Romans loved setting examples for criminals, traitors, and occasionally those rebellious types who just can't help making life difficult, even in death. But probably the most famous upside-down death was that of St. Peter, one of Jesus' 12 apostles. Legend says when Peter got sentenced to crucifixion under Emperor Nero, he had a weird request. Nail me upside down. I'm not worthy to die like my Lord. And Rome, being efficient as always, went, sure, why not? That's when things got a bit intense. Crucifixion was already a nightmare of a death, a combo of choking, bleeding out, and public humiliation. But flip the guy upside down, and it changes everything. Blood rushes to your head, muscles stretch in all the wrong ways, breathing becomes nearly impossible, and the pain, oh, it's glorious. Imagine this, it's like sitting through a boring lecture, but upside down, while someone's hammering nails into your ankles. Definitely not the fun kind of upside down, but this wasn't just about pain, it had symbolism. The upside down cross, ironically, became a symbol of humility. Peter's choice was all about respect, not rebellion. Too bad later horror movies and metal bands totally hijacked that image and turned it into a PR nightmare with a whole different vibe. The Romans didn't care about symbolism. To them, it was a message mess with us, and will make your death as weird and unforgettable as possible. So next time you're horsing around, hopefully not actually hanging upside down, remember ancient Rome could turn any punishment into a theatrical performance. Hanging upside down wasn't just dying, it was dying with extra drama. Decimation, the ultimate brutal team-building exercise with bonus trauma. When you think inspirational speech, you might imagine a coach yelling, "Win together, lose together," but in ancient Rome, it was more like, "We march together, or 1 in 10 of you dies." Welcome to the charming world of decimation, a military punishment so savage, it makes modern boot camp look like a spa day. Here's the deal if a Roman unit chickened out, tried to desert, or rebelled. The commander had a nuclear option, not bombs, just pure psychological warfare. The whole group lined up, and every 10th guy drew a straw. The unlucky ones, they got beaten to death by 9 of their own comrades. using sticks, stones, or whatever was handy. Yep, you heard right. Not only did you face death, but you had to kill your buddy, the same guy you probably had a beer and bread with last night, all to prove loyalty to Rome. It's like Survivor Roman Edition, except no one's safe. And everyone ends up with some serious PTSD. And don't think the survivors got a break. The 9 left standing didn't get applause or a long weekend. Instead, they got rations of barley instead of wheat, a Roman way of saying, "We're disappointed in you, and we're forced to camp outside the fortress's safe zone." The cold logic of decimation if you fear your own squad more than the enemy. You'll think twice before running. Weirdly, it actually worked. Roman discipline was notoriously harsh, and decimation kept soldiers marching in line, even if it meant stepping over a few corpses. One of the most famous decimations was carried out by Cassius, a wealthy general who teamed up with Julius Caesar and Pompey after a humiliating defeat during the Spartacus slave revolt. Cassius dealt with a hated unit by decimating them because nothing says we're back on track like a casual internal massacre. So next time your boss says, "We need more team accountability," be glad you're not living under Cassius in Rome. Failure wasn't just punished, it was evenly distributed. The heretic's fork, a medieval torture device nobody wanted to try. Imagine living in late Roman Empire times, when things got weird, dark, and obsessively anti-heretic. If you dared talk back to the church or challenge a sacred belief, Rome didn't just scold you, they gifted you an unforgettable accessory, the heretic's fork. Picture this: a metal bar with 2 prongs on each end. One set points up under your chin, the other jabs into your upper chest like a mini trident clamped tight around your neck. Sounds uncomfortable, right? Oh, this is just the warm-up. Once strapped on, you weren't allowed to move your head an inch. Look down pronged, look up pronged. Try whispering heretical thoughts to your neighbor, pronged by your own collar. It didn't draw blood, at least not at first. That's the clever part. The fork wasn't meant to kill you. It wanted to wear you down mentally, physically, spiritually. You'd have to stand still, maybe for days, muscles screaming, just to avoid stabbing yourself. It's like a deadly game of don't move, where the prize is not getting slowly skewered through your throat. And while it's called the heretic's fork, it was also used on blasphemers, witches, lying suspects, and whoever bothers a bishop before breakfast is basically doomed. This is like Torture 2.0, custom built for silence, stillness, and soul-crushing pain to up the drama. The fork had tiny Latin inscriptions like, "I renounce sin," or "I am guilty," because nothing spices up confession like being slowly skewered by words. Crazy enough. This punishment wasn't even the worst in Rome, just a warm-up for sinners, no blood, no public execution, just silent suffering and inner panic. A painful intro class, Heresy 101. So if you've ever tried to hold back a sneeze in a boring meeting, imagine doing that for 3 days straight with an iron spike slicing your neck in Rome. Silence wasn't golden, it was mandatory, enforced by rusty prongs and a neck pain that felt like the gods themselves were trolling you. Then there's being tossed off the Tarpeian Rock, Rome's OG unfriend button. Forget petty revenge texts or unfollowing on social media. In ancient Rome, betraying the state didn't just cut your connection, it threw you off a cliff. Welcome to the Tarpeian Rock, an 80-foot drop straight off the south face of Capitoline Hill, just a stone's throw from the Roman Forum. This spot wasn't just for sightseeing, it was where the Republic dealt with its trash by tossing traitors straight down to their doom. And yes, it's as dramatic as it sounds. The cliff's named after Tarpeia, a Roman girl who betrayed the city to the hostile Sabines for some shiny gold bracelets she only dreamed about. The practical Sabines, instead of handing over gold, crushed her with their shields still counted as a deal. Her body was dumped off the cliff, which then got named after her. Moral of the story: don't trust invaders or shady payoff schemes. After that, the Tarpeian Rock became Rome's favorite tool for dealing with traitors, corrupt officials, lying witnesses, and anyone who made the state go, yeah, this guy needs a lesson. No hanging, no beheading, just a quick drop and done. The condemned were stripped naked, paraded in front of the crowd, then led to the edge where gravity took over. And of course, there was always an audience. Nothing says classic execution like a public spectacle to spice up the market day. Open, final, and full of symbolism. The guy didn't just die, he was physically and spiritually kicked out of the city, the ultimate Roman cancel culture. Fun fact, the cliff sits right next to Jupiter's temple. So if you lied to the gods or the government, you got a last-minute view of heaven, just a quick peek though. Over time, more dramatic punishments popped up: lions, crucifixion, burning alive. But the Tarpeian Rock stayed iconic, simple but classy, ruthless but clear. Next time someone says they got thrown under the bus, remind them Romans did it first. No bus wheels involved, just a rock and betrayal echoing through the hills. Damnatio ad bestias, death by lion, applause or not. Your call. Welcome to the Colosseum Rocks, Sweat, and 50,000 roaring fans. Ancient Rome's version of cable TV. Tonight's main event, Damnatio ad bestias, aka being tossed to the beasts while the crowd snacks. This punishment, meaning condemned to be eaten alive, was Rome's go-to for criminals, traitors, prisoners of war, and especially Christians who refused to worship imperial gods. And don't get it twisted, this wasn't just about death. It was a show. Rome didn't do boring executions, they did theater. The condemned were thrown into the arena where hungry lions, leopards, bears, and sometimes even elephants waited. But here's the twist: Rome, being Rome, often made victims wear costumes first. Yep, they turned death into a morality play. One unlucky soul might play Orpheus, only to get mauled mid-harp solo. Another might star as the villainous Prometheus, picked apart by birds in a painfully accurate reenactment. It was a mashup of entertainment, justice, and religious propaganda wrapped in a furry disaster. Wonder if they got to defend themselves? Nope. This wasn't a trial. It was a death sentence packaged with applause. The crowd showed up for blood, and if the lion was sleepy that day, no worries, the Romans had tricks, like poking it with hot irons or starving it first. The show had to go on. And remember, it wasn't just hardened criminals. You could land in the arena for theft, political dissent, or even violating religious laws. The only thing saving you from a lion lunch was the emperor's mercy. But don't mistake this for mere sadism. It was calculated. A warning to anyone thinking about crossing the line: one wrong move, and your dinner. Rome ruled by fear and lions. Over time, Christian martyrs flipped the script, turning death by claws into a badge of honor. But for most, Damnatio ad bestias wasn't about glory. It was a pure nightmare fuel. So next time you complain about jury duty, be glad you're not. So, picture this dressing up like a mythological god to dodge jaguars. But wait, there's more. Rome's idea of an honorable forced suicide. Yep, in ancient Rome. Getting the death sentence didn't always mean a brutal death in the arena, or a cliff dive. Sometimes. If you were lucky or had some serious political connections, you got a special punishment. Forced suicide sounds like a weird flex. Right, I'm not killing you, but you should probably do it yourself. Here's how it worked if you were a senator, noble, or someone fancy enough to own more than one toga, and you pissed off the emperor maybe by plotting a coup or just being too confident you'd get a polite little visit. A scroll would show up a nice little note from the emperor saying, "You've embarrassed the state. Please choose the classy exit." Translation: kill yourself before sundown, or we'll do it for you, and trust me, it won't be pretty. The perk, if you comply, your family keeps the cash, and your name isn't totally dragged through the mud. Think of it as Rome's version of a severance package, just with more blood and fewer HR forms. This wasn't considered humiliating. It was actually kind of noble, believe it or not. Many bigwig officials saw it as the last chance to be in control, your chance to write the final chapter. Sometimes, literally. Imagine a warm bath, a razor quietly slicing your wrists, and one last dramatic monologue, very fitting for Rome's love of drama. The young philosopher Seneca got this gift, once accused maybe wrongly of plotting against Emperor Nero. He was told to end it himself. He slit his wrists and ankles, but it was the blood loss that finished him off. Sometimes they even let you go out with a bit of style. The wooden donkey, where even sitting becomes a crime. If you ever complained about an uncomfortable chair, ancient Rome wants a word. One of their creative punishments involved a piece of furniture known as the wooden donkey, or the death pain pony. Spoiler, it's not a real donkey. It's a tall, narrow wooden spike shaped like an A-frame, with a razor-thin top. The condemned, usually thieves, slaves, or rebel soldiers, had to straddle it. Yep, full body weight pressed right onto that sharp edge, right between the legs. But hold up, it gets worse. To really drive the point home, pun intended, they'd often tie weights to the ankles. Gravity then did the rest. The longer you sat, the more that wooden spike scraped into your flesh. Ouch doesn't even cover it. Depending on the executioner's mood, you might be left there for hours. The Romans didn't invent this torture. It probably came from earlier Middle Eastern methods. But boy, did they love it. Because if Rome had a favorite thing, it was punishment with a show. And it wasn't always a death sentence. Sometimes it was just a very public, very convincing humiliation. Picture this: a crowded square. A merchant caught cheating customers, now bawling on the donkey while kids laugh and street vendors sell snacks. Pain, performance, and a life lesson all wrapped up in one. Even Roman generals sometimes used it as battlefield discipline. Soldiers who stepped out of line could be made to ride the donkey as a reminder, because nothing says morale booster like internal bleeding. And yep, there were variations. Metal donkeys, spiked donkeys, you name it. There are even records of heated versions. Because apparently Rome was all about feedback and instant upgrades. It was both humiliating and brutal, turning a simple sitting position into a punishment that left scars on body and soul. So next time your office chair feels stiff, just remember, at least it's not a sharp triangle with rocks tied to your ankles. In ancient Rome, bad posture was the least of your worries. Furniture as a tattoo, yep. Rome made mugshots permanent. In a world without ID cards, background checks, or Google, ancient Rome had a simple way to keep track of criminals, branding them right on the face. Yes, branding not like a cute company logo, but literally stamping a criminal label on your forehead if you were a thief, runaway slave, or repeat offender. Congrats, you now had a permanent "Don't Trust This Guy" sign screaming at everyone. The brand was usually applied with a hot metal rod, pressed into skin with all the subtlety of a blacksmith on deadline. Letters like F for fur thief or C for calumniator, basically. A professional liar were burned onto your forehead or cheek. Imagine the ancient Roman version of a one-star Yelp review, but on your skull, and this wasn't done behind closed doors. No, branding was a public event, a spectacle, a lesson. The idea was to shame criminals so badly that it made people think twice. It wasn't just punishment, it was propaganda burned into flesh. Now imagine living with that mark. Walking through the market, everyone knows your business. Jabe hunting, good luck with that. Flirting, forget it. You're not a person anymore. You're a walking crime scene. Runaway slaves got the worst of it. Many were branded with FUG, short for fugitivus, meaning escapee, and if they ran away again, even harsher branding or worse. Slaves weren't just property, they had rebellion tattooed on them like a badge of shame. Some clever ones tried to cover up with tattoos, or even makeup, but Rome, always ready, made those acts illegal too. Messing with your own branding back then was like trying to Photoshop a criminal record. Nobody's buying it. Later emperors like Constantine tried to cool things down by stamping hands or feet instead of faces. Still, the goal was the same: eternal humiliation. So next time someone tells you to face the consequences, be glad they're not joking, because in ancient Rome, they didn't just remember your crime, they made your face remember it too. Tongue cutting for blasphemy, say goodbye to chit-chat. Ancient Rome had a kind of free speech, with conditions. You could praise the emperor, debate philosophy, or recite poetry, just don't blaspheme, curse the gods, insult the emperor, or whisper the wrong words in the wrong ear, and bam, a punishment that's both literal and brutal, cutting out your tongue. Yep, really? The logic: if words are dangerous, Rome would just shut you up for good. No anesthesia, no sterile tools, just pure medieval nightmare. Clamps, iron, and pure agony. A soldier or executioner would clamp your tongue, slice it off, or in some cases, just rip it out. This wasn't surgery. It was state-approved censorship, and it wasn't always about religion. Sure, blaspheming the gods got you fast-tracked, especially if you mocked Jupiter in public or doubted the sacred fire. But usually, blasphemy meant bad-mouthing the emperor or the empire's moral order. Basically, if your mouth annoyed the bigwigs, you became an emergency medical case. Just one wrong joke, one heretical whisper, one rebellious song tongue gone. This punishment was brutal and theatrical. Public tongue cutting sent a clear message: words have power. But ours is stronger, and if you survived, life sucked. You couldn't speak clearly, defend yourself, or even scream properly. Total social death by disability, no scarlet letter on your skin, but carved deep into your silence. Ironically, some early Christian martyrs faced this fate. They refused to renounce their faith and kept preaching. Rome couldn't silence their ideas, so it went after the messengers, literally shutting their mouths. Later, Christians turned these stories into legends of divine courage, which only made Rome matter. If that sounds gruesome, remember Rome loved control, and nothing controls people better than cutting out their voice. So next time someone tells you, keep your mouth shut, be glad it's just a saying, because in ancient Rome, they meant business. Moving on to the torture wheel, when your bones become a work of art. Thought Rome ran out of creative ways to torture. Meet the wheel, also called the bone-breaking wheel, or for drama fans, the Catherine Wheel, a name from the Middle Ages. This wasn't an execution, it was horrific sculpture with human bodies as the canvas. Here's how it went down first. The condemned was tied to a big wooden wheel, limbs spread like a creepy starfish. Then an executioner grabbed a heavy iron bar and got to work breaking limbs one by one, slowly and deliberately. The goal wasn't instant death. Oh no. The point was to shatter bones but keep the victim alive. Break arms, crush thighs, twist ankles until they barely looked like ankles. The body would fold unnaturally, turning into a gruesome, precise pain painting. The creepiest part, the broken corpse was threaded through the wheel's spokes, limbs bent and pierced like a horror project. Sometimes the wheel was hung on a pole as a chip warning flag. Other times, it was spun slowly in the breeze, because why not add theatrical creepiness? This wasn't just punishment, it was a public messaging. The wheel was for especially nasty crimes like murder, treason, or highway robbery. It told the crowd, this is what happens when you cross the line. And you didn't just die, you decomposed in full public view. Survivors were rare. But here's the sick twist if someone managed to hang on for a day or two. Sometimes mercy came with a final blow to the chest or neck, crazy as it sounds. This punishment outlasted Rome itself. Medieval Europe loved it so much, they turned it into an art form adding spikes, fire, and epic drama. Rome just set the stage. So next time you're wiped out from work, remember at least you're not strapped to a giant wooden wheel, starring in a public bone exhibit. In Rome, justice wasn't blind, it was bold, brutal, and designed for maximum exposure. Hot ashes punishment dying slow and painful in fine dust fire when it came to creative killing. Ancient Rome always had some boiling over idea, literally. Boiling over, introducing a little known but terrifying execution, death by hot ashes. Not as famous as crucifixion or lion chow, but maybe one of the slowest, most psychologically brutal deaths ever invented. No stabbing, no bloodshed, no quick end, just hot, suffocating, endless ash. This horrific method was believed to, no surprise here, Emperor Nero, the guy who treated executions like a Broadway show. One time, he buried a dude alive up to his neck, classic Roman move. But instead of chopping off his head or pelting him with stones, Nero tried something new, shoving a funnel in the guy's mouth and slowly pouring hot ashes down it. Not boiling water, not fire ashes. At first, it sounds harmless. Ashes are soft, right? But here's the creepy twist. Ashes burn to like hell. They choke your throats, scald your lungs, and suffocate you from the inside. Not a quick death, more like a slow, miserable fade out. Slowly, you feel air's every moment, every breath turning into fire, every swallow possibly your last. And when the ashes settle, you're not bleeding, you're not burned on the outside, but inside. Everything's shutting down, death by dust, suffocated in silence. Why ashes? Because it's humiliating. Totally undignified. Ashes are the leftovers of destruction, used to scrub away dirt, erase all traces of what was burned. Dying in ashes means you're so worthless. You don't even deserve a sword or a flame. You don't even deserve a dramatic death. Just slow erosion of what's left. Worth noting, this punishment wasn't common. It was reserved for people Nero hated the most, those he wanted to vanish quietly, but also mess with mentally. And for the crowd, nothing to see here, no blood, no screams, just some guy in a hole and a slow drip of gray dust. So next time someone says, ash this, dust that, Remember in Nero's Rome, that wasn't poetry, it was a process. Tunica molesta, Rome's deadliest fashion disaster. In ancient Rome, fashion didn't kill you unless you wore the tunica molesta, aka the burn your ass cloak. Picture this: you're thrown into the arena or tied to a stake, and instead of chains or ropes, the executioner hands you a cloak. Oh, great, you think, at least I'm wearing something. Then you notice it's dripping not water, but pitch, tar, and oil. That's tunica molesta, literally the annoying tunic, but really a suit stuffed with the most flammable nightmare materials, soaked in fuel, hugging your body tight, then lit on fire while you're still very much alive inside. This wasn't just execution, it was a public spectacle, most famous under emperors like Nero, who turned executions into post-dinner entertainment at his infamous garden parties. Nero used the tunica molesta to light up the place human torches, illuminating his bizarre Roman fun. Who wore it? Arsonists, traitors, Christians, anyone deemed worthy of a particularly dramatic exit. The flames clung to the body, melting skin, burning hair, and scorching lungs, and no escape, no rolling around to put out the flames. The cloak stuck to you, it burned with you, and because Rome loved borrowing from mythology, they sometimes copied Hercules' poisoned cloak, a garment that made the hero suffer unbearable pain before death. Rome didn't just kill you, they made it poetic. The real sick twist, if you want to call it that, was psychological. You weren't just dying, you were on display screaming, thrashing, burning in front of an audience. It sent a clearer message than any tombstone. This is what happens when you mess with the empire. Records even say music played during the burning. Nero was supposedly strumming his lyre while watching the flames rise. Talk about a hot performance. So if you ever complain about tight or itchy clothes, be glad they're not soaked in oil and part of a public execution. Because in Rome, fashion wasn't just a statement, it was a screaming curse of damnatio memoriae. When Rome erased your name from history, most punishments ended in death, but some went way beyond that, hitting memory, legacy, total obliteration. This was damnatio memoriae, the curse of forgetting, Rome's most haunting punishment, because what's worse than death, being deliberately erased. If you were an emperor embarrassing the state, a rebellious general, or a disgraced senator, Rome didn't just kill you, they wiped you out completely. Statues smashed or defaced, inscriptions chiseled away, portraits painted over, your name scratched out of official records, coins, and monuments. If you had achievements, they got handed to someone else. If you had supporters, their voices got silenced. And the worst part, it actually worked. Many victims of damnatio memoriae were powerful, famous, scary, but now we can't even remember their names because Rome was that good at erasing you. Entire dynasties have vanished in silence, like history just evaporated. The most notorious case, Emperor Geta, Caracalla's brother, after Caracalla had him assassinated right in their mother's arms. He didn't stop there. He ordered Geta's image erased from every mosaic, painting, and bust. Thousands of inscriptions were altered, and his name scraped off by hand in some surviving artworks. You can still spot Geta's ghost, awkward empty spaces, half faces, names partially scratched out. Creepy. Right. Like history itself got caught red-handed trying to forget. But damnatio memoriae wasn't just revenge, it was control. If Rome could rewrite the past, it could sculpt the future, erase someone from existence, and their ideas vanish with them. That's how the empire said, "You never existed, and if you dared argue, well, you'd be next." There's something eerily modern about this. Today, we talk about cancel culture, social eras, reputations destroyed in hours, but Rome did it 2,000 years ago, just swapping tweets for chisels. So, as we close this weird chapter on Rome's freakiest punishments, remember this: the cruelest sentence wasn't fire, lions, or ropes, it was silence, because in ancient Rome, the worst fate was being forgotten. In the early 1800s, America stretched endlessly westward, wild, mysterious, whispering promises to the brave enough to chase them. East was crowded with cities, factories, and fading farmland, claustrophobic and cramped. But the West, that was the dream, a blank canvas just risky enough for the paint to stick. It started as rumors in taverns, churches, around dinner tables, stories of vast lands, rivers glittering like silver, valleys blooming with zero effort. The 1803 Louisiana Purchase doubled young America's size overnight. Suddenly, there was space, unbelievable space, officially nobody's land. For many, the West wasn't just a compass point, it was a fresh start, a place where your name didn't carry debt, where no one asked where you came from, only what you could do with your hands. It called dreamers and daredevils alike, farmers chasing new soil, widows seeking peace, adventurers hunting campfire legends. No highways, no guarantees, no second chances. Every westward trip began with a question: would the wagon survive the mountains? Would the river freeze too soon? Would there be food on the other side? And yet tens of thousands set out whole families. Babies swaddled in flour sacks, grandmas stuffed between barrels of salted pork, stepping into the unknown. Heading west was an all-in bet. Staying put was surrendering to a limited life. The frontier wasn't just a map dot, it was a test of will, grit, and the power to carve order from chaos with wood, steel, and pure hope. And as the sun set over endless plains and mountains, casting long shadows on wheels and weary faces, one thing was clear: the American story. It was far from finished. It crept westward, mile by creaky mile. Before pioneers could conquer the wild, they had to build a vessel carrying not just belongings, but their future. That was the covered wagon, the backbone of westward migration. Not fancy carriages or leather-clad rides, a wooden box on wheels, held together by sweat, hope, and iron nails. Most families didn't build their own. They bought or modified what was around. The most famous was the Conestoga. But on the frontier, folks wanted something smaller, lighter, cheaper. That was the prairie schooner, named for its canvas sail, puffing in the wind like a ship on the grass sea. But this ship didn't haul gold or treasure. It carried salted pork, flour, beans, cast iron pots, spinning wheels, Bibles, and maybe a good blanket. Every inch mattered. Space meant life. Weight could kill you. A loaded wagon could weigh up to 2,000 pounds. Go over, and the oxen would drop before hitting the Rockies. Horses were fragile, mules expensive. Oxen were the real engines of expansion, slow, stubborn, unstoppable. Families slept in, under, or beside their wagons. Privacy was a rare luxury, and despite Hollywood's take, no one sat inside all day. That'd shake your bones to jelly. Most walked miles and miles under blazing sun. The wagon wasn't just transport, it was a survival base. It carried medicine, spare parts, gunpowder, seeds. Some families even hauled baby chicks under the bed to start a coop once they settled. It's long, exhausting, and covered in dust. Every day starts before dawn. No need for roosters. The creak of harnesses and wagon wheels is the alarm clock. On average, the wagon train covers about 10 to 15 miles a day weather, terrain, and how many axles snap that day all factor in. Over time, trails like Oregon, Santa Fe, and California carved themselves into the earth, littered with abandoned gear, busted wheels, and graves of folks who never made it west. Meals simple survival style and mind-numbingly repetitive. Coffee was a luxury. Water was a gamble. Streams might be clean or swimming with bacteria. Boiling helped if you had fuel and time. Otherwise, it was all luck and prayer. Food was rationed salted meat, hardtack, dried beans, and sometimes wild game if someone got lucky with a shot. Wild onions and berries were precious treats. Disease was the real killer on the trail. Cholera spread like wildfire from dirty water and could kill in hours. Diarrhea, scurvy, and snake bites also took their toll. No doctors around, just folk remedies and hope. Sometimes hope wasn't enough. Still, there were good times. Kids played with sticks, stones, or chased wagon shadows. Weddings happened on the road, and babies were born too. Families were bonded not just by blood, but by shared hardship and dusty friendships. At night, wagons circled up not to fend off natives like the legends say, but to keep out thieves, wild animals, and the cold. Fires were lit, bread baked on hot stones, and sometimes someone fiddled for a few hours. Laughter and music fought off the dark, but sleep was always short. Tomorrow was more wild, uncertain miles. Life on the trail was survival by routine. You learned to love your boots and hate blisters. You mourned quietly, but kept moving because the land wasn't waiting for your sadness. It just pushed west. After weeks, sometimes months, the sight of trees, water, and plains made pioneers drop to their knees in thanks. But the joy was short-lived once the family found land. The real work was just beginning. Settling down wasn't glamorous. No ready-made houses, no fences, no roads, just empty land and a ticking farming calendar. Priority 1, build a home. Usually a tiny one-room wooden shack just big enough for the family. Tools were sparse. Every log had to be chopped, trimmed, and hauled by hand or ox. No power saws, no blueprints, just axes, grit, and guesswork. Most shacks had dirt floors, muddy when wet, frozen solid in winter. Windows were often just holes, covered with animal hides or oiled paper to let light in while blocking some cold wind. Chimneys were a luxury. Many shacks started with smoke holes in the roof. You'd cough a lot indoors. Families slept on piles of straw, animal skins, or corn husks. Beds were ropes stretched over wooden frames, if lucky. Gaps between slats were stuffed with mud and moss to block drafts, if not. The wind had its way. Then came the first winter, the soul-crushing test. If the family hadn't stocked enough wood or food, the following months could mean hunger or frostbite. Blizzards could trap them indoors for days. Wolves howled at night, prowling nearby, but that frontier spirit hung tough. Families made candles from animal fat. Kids learned to patch clothes and cook over campfires. They read the Bible by firelight. They wrote letters home if there was a way to send them. Neighbors were few, but when a new shack popped up, help was there roof raising, loaning cattle, or a hot meal. Survival wasn't just muscle, it was community. One family might not make it, but 10 could. That first winter wasn't just cold. It was the quiet test where dreams either hardened into resolve or got buried under snow on the American frontier. Strength wasn't just about biceps, it was grit, sacrifice, and quiet courage that never quit, and no one showed that better than frontier mothers. Forget the delicate ladies in novels, these women were warriors in aprons. The second they stepped off the wagon, they turned into builders, farmers, midwives, butchers, doctors, and teachers all rolled into one, whatever needed doing. They did it, because no one else would, up before dawn to churn butter, bake bread, and milk cows all before most men even opened an eye. They gardened, preserved food, cared for animals, and sewed every stitch of the family's clothes, often from scratch. When sickness hit, herbal remedies were their go-to. When babies arrived, they were the midwives, sometimes for neighbors, sometimes for themselves. A frontier woman could kill a snake with a shovel in the morning and be teaching her kid their ABCs by evening, sometimes losing a child to fever, but still having dinner waiting at night. Guns were just part of life. Husbands gone or dead, women defended their homes with whatever they had: rifles, axes, frying pans. There are tales of women fending off wolves and raiders while cradling babies. Loneliness was the enemy, nearest neighbor miles away. Letters took weeks or months to arrive. Silence was deafening. Yet these women endured, stitching civilization from wilderness one needle, one lesson, one loaf of bread at a time. Frontier women were the heart of the community. They built cattle pens, cared for sick neighbors, threw Sunday dinners when churches were just blueprints, when towns sprouted. They were often the ones demanding schools, libraries, and laws. They weren't just side characters in the frontier story. They were the backbone, gritty, forgotten, but impossible to ignore once you knew their power. Next time you picture the Wild West, don't just think cowboy hats and horses. Think of a woman with hair tied back, sleeves rolled up, a pistol by the door, cornbread baking in the oven, every wagon heading west, every house built, every field plowed already had someone there first. The American frontier wasn't empty. Hundreds of indigenous nations had called it home for centuries, even millennia. From the Great Plains to the Pacific Coast, the land soaked up native life, hunting grounds, sacred sites, migration routes, meaningful rivers, but to the U.S. government and most settlers, this wasn't home, it was potential, and thus began the sad saga of broken promises. The government signed treaty after treaty with tribes promising peace, land rights, resources, but most got broken. Settlers poured west, tribes got pushed back, then pushed back again, sometimes with ink, sometimes with bullets. Entire nations forced into reservations, usually barren lands far from their ancestors' homes. Cherokee, Choctaws, Lakota, Comanche, and many others became strangers on their own soil. Some tribes tried diplomacy, others fought back. Armed conflicts erupted: Black Hawk War, Sand Creek Massacre, Little Bighorn. But even when native warriors won battles, they lost the war. The government rolled in soldiers, railroads, hungry settlers ready to take land at any cost. It wasn't just land theft. It was cultural annihilation, kids ripped from families, sent to boarding schools, punished for speaking their mother tongue, sacred traditions banned, indigenous identity treated like trash to be erased, civilized, or rewritten. Yet somehow, native peoples survived. Voices whispered in secret, songs soared in resistance, stories passed down like living flames. The romantic image of the frontier often forgets this price. But the truth is, westward expansion wasn't everyone's victory. Cultural wipeout kids ripped from their families, shoved into boarding schools, punished for speaking their own language, sacred traditions banned, indigenous identity treated like some annoying weed to be uprooted, civilized, or rewritten, but no matter what, indigenous people survived. Quiet whispers kept secret, songs raised in rebellion, stories passed down like a stubborn flame. The romantic image of the frontier often forgets this price, but here's the truth. Westward expansion wasn't exactly a win for everyone. For many, it was a slow-motion tragedy and destruction to get the American frontier. You gotta see both sides, the grit of the settlers and the heartbreak of those pushed aside, because history, like land, holds a bunch of stories. On the frontier, law and order showed up late, sometimes not at all. Lots of new towns had no cops, no courts, no jails. Justice wasn't about rules. It was about who yelled louder, pulled faster, or had a bigger posse. Long story short, frontier law wore many faces, and it wasn't always the good guy. At first, self-rule was the game. Citizens' committees popped up when crimes happened: horse theft, store robberies, or worse. They held makeshift trials in saloons or under trees. If found guilty, punishment was swift: a bullet, a noose, or exile with a bruised ego. Towns grew, and so did the lawmen, sheriffs, marshals, deputies. Guys like Wyatt Earp, Bat Masterson, and Wild Bill Hickok became legends. Some brave, some corrupt, most a bit of both. With 10 badges and 6 shooters, they balanced chaos and order on a knife's edge. But just as fast as they showed up, outlaws did too. The frontier was a magnet for drifters, deserters, gamblers, and gunslingers wanting to vanish into the dust. Billy the Kid, Jesse James, Butch Cassidy weren't just robbing banks and trains. They hijacked imaginations. Newspapers turned them into folk heroes, even though they left plenty of bodies and blown safes behind. Frontier justice was unpredictable. You could be hanged for horse theft or get off murder charges if the jury liked your story better. Bribes worked, threats worked, and sometimes justice was just revenge in a sharper hat. Even courtrooms, when they existed, were often just a grocery store doubling as a hardware shop with a part-time judge. Despite the chaos, or maybe because of it, the frontier communities slowly built legal systems. Judges replaced vigilantes, jails replaced hanging branches. But legends, they never died. And maybe they never will, because on the edge of the known world, justice wasn't blind. It was armed, dusty, and didn't ask twice. At first, the American frontier moved as slowly as a creaky wagon wheel, slow, squeaky, and weather-dependent, but by the mid to late 19th century, the quiet of the plains was shattered by a new sound, the steam whistle. The arrival of the railroad changed everything. Suddenly, journeys that took months by horse-drawn wagon could be done in days. The Transcontinental Railroad, finished in 1869, connected east and west with a steel hug that transformed the frontier. From wilderness to trade corridor, settlers flooded in, towns popped up overnight beside new stations, and goods from stoves to sewing needles rode the rails instead of piling up or being handmade. For pioneers, the railroad was life itself. It meant medicine could arrive before a fever turned deadly. It meant crops could be sold beyond the local market. It meant letters, once delayed by weather and rivers, could travel in days. The frontier became less about luck and more about calculation. But the railroad didn't come alone. Running alongside were telegraph wires, thin copper threads buzzing with dots and dashes that linked the country. The telegraph gave the frontier something it never had before: instant communication. A Wyoming rancher could get presidential election results in minutes. A sheriff could call for backups 100 miles away. Isolation. The pioneer's worst nightmare began dying, beep by beep. The impact was huge, so the economy expanded, government reached farther, police reacted faster, but not everyone loved it. Native tribes saw railroads and telegraph poles as an invasion proof their once free-range lands were now tied up in wires and chopped into pieces. Some fought back, sabotaging lines, derailing trains, delaying the inevitable, but progress kept rolling. The iron horse was unstoppable. Towns skipped by the railroad withered away. Others exploded into cities, almost overnight. The desert shrank, mile by mile, rail by rail, and while the frontier spirit didn't vanish, it was no longer isolated. It got wired, connected, and commercialized. The frontier stayed wild, but now it ran on steam and signals. By the end of the 19th century, a profound shift happened. The line that once separated wilderness from settled land, the famous frontier line, blurred, faded, and finally disappeared. In 1890, the U.S. Census Bureau officially declared, "There is hardly a frontier line anymore." In other words, the American frontier was closed. The race west was over. Forests were cleared, railroads linked coast to coast, buffalo herds were nearly gone, and tribes were confined to reservations. The vast, mysterious land had been surveyed, mapped, and parceled out like real estate. But what did that really mean for some? It was a win, a dream come true, one tamed continent, one nation stretching from sea to shining sea. For others, especially native peoples and displaced communities, it was erasure, loss, and a bitter silence where home once was. But the end of the frontier wasn't just geography, it was identity, rugged individualism, the lone pioneer myth, campfire tales of grit and hardship. They didn't vanish. They turned into legend. Writers like Frederick Jackson Turner argued the frontier shaped the American soul: democracy, toughness, and restlessness. The frontier taught Americans how to adapt, survive, rely on themselves and their neighbors. It gave us cowboys, log cabin presidents, gold prospectors, all icons woven into the national myth. But the truth was messier. The frontier was sweat, dirt, sickness, and death. It was brave and brutal, hopeful and unfair, full of contradictions. Its legacy still reflects that tension today. The frontier survives not in geography, but in spirit, in the idea that venturing into the unknown, whether land, science, or space, defines what it means to be American. Wagons no longer roll. Log cabins are museums. Trails are highways. But if you listen closely, you can still catch echoes in the prairie wind, passed down through stories from folks brave enough to roam further. The American frontier didn't vanish. It just became the foundation. Before instruments, there was rhythm, the stomp of feet, clapping hands, the beat of a quiet heart. Music didn't start with wood, strings, or bones. It started with the body, with breath, tens of thousands of years ago, before writing, farming, or architecture. Prehistoric humans found something magical in sound, in caves and on the plains, by campfires and in forests. They realized some action, stomping, shouting, whistling, could stir emotions, grab attention, or even calm fears. Music, it seems, wasn't a cultural invention, it was biology. Picture a tiny band of hunter-gatherers huddled around a flickering fire, One hums a low drone, another claps the beat, a third mimics birdsong. No words, just sounds in that moment. They weren't lonely individuals battling nature, they connected. They were human. Before flutes, even before drums, sound was sacred. Many anthropologists believe early music sprang from mimicry, copying animal calls to hunt or imitating natural noises to communicate from afar. But eventually, those sounds stopped being just practical. They became expressive. Rhythm wasn't just a signal anymore. It turned into the language of feeling. Humming turned into lullabies. Shouting morphed into songs. Some theories say music came before language, or at least alongside it before we talked. We sang. Babies today still respond instinctively to melody and tone more than words. There's something wired into us about pitch, rhythm, and vibration. We didn't invent music, we remembered it. And the best part, those first sounds weren't just for the elite or the talented. They were a shared experience of early humans everywhere. Music popped up in Africa, Asia, Europe, anywhere people had voices, hands, and something to bang or shake. Before the first flute was carved from bone, before strings stretched tight and drums had skins, humans already knew sound could move the soul, and that was just the beginning. In Europe's ice-cold Ice Age, when mammoths roamed and glaciers sliced through the land, a quiet revolution was happening, not with tools or fire, but with sound, somewhere in a cave. A prehistoric human grabbed a hollow bird bone, drilled a few holes, and blew. The sound that came out clear, haunting, intentional. This wasn't an accident, it was the birth of an instrument. Archaeologists have found bone flutes over 40,000 years old, the oldest instruments on Earth, found in places like Germany's Hohlfels cave. These flutes were made from vulture wing bones or mammoth ivory, not exactly easy materials to work with. But the maker carefully drilled finger holes at just the right spots to play different notes. That precision says something deep. This wasn't random. It was music structured, repeatable, made to express. Why did they do it? Maybe the sounds copied birdsong, calling to nature. Maybe it was part of rituals marking life, death, or the seasons. Or maybe, just maybe, someone made a flute simply to bring beauty into the darkness. People often think prehistoric humans were crude survival machines, but the flute proves otherwise. It shows creativity, a mind that looked at a bone and didn't see food, but potential. These instruments also hint at community. Playing a flute solo is music, sure, but together they made rhythm, harmony, a shared experience around the fire. Maybe flutes joined singing, clapping, or drumming on wood and stone. Music echoed, bounced off cave walls, the first concert in human history. And remember, Ice Age flutes predate farming, the wheel, and writing. In the creativity charts, music pops up early, not some luxury, but a survival must-have. Ice Age flutes weren't just tools. They expressed joy, sorrow, mystery, and ritual, fragile whispers from deep history, still stirring us today. From bones and breath, humans crafted tunes. If flutes were the first words, drums were our heartbeat. Before cities, before kings, people gathered under stars, clapping, stomping, and beating rhythms into the earth. Drums didn't come from one place. They sprang up across continents and cultures. Like the human body and the planet wanted to sync up. The earliest drums might have been animal skins stretched over hollow logs or clay pots. They were rhythm makers, ritual tools, means of communication, and symbols of power. Drum beats could call spirits, lead armies, or summon villages, not just noise, signals. In Africa, some of the oldest drum traditions go back tens of thousands of years. There, drums became voices, musical instruments, speaking tonal languages, mimicking human speech. In Siberia, shamans drummed themselves into trance, the beat opening a door to the spirit world. In the Amazon, water drums echoed through the jungle like thunder made by human hands. What makes drums vital isn't just sound, but their universality. No melody needed, no fancy training, just feel the beat. And you feel it for real. Drums marked births, funerals, weddings, harvests, and wars. Their pulse brought order to chaos. Rhythms could bond tribes, unify rituals, or prep warriors for battle. Drums said, "We are one." Even in early farming, drums played a part. Farmers beat sticks to scare off birds. Harvest festivals featured drum-led dances. Rhythm marked time, not just in hours, but seasons, cycles, and changes over time. Drums evolved. People carved, painted, and added spiritual symbols to their instruments. Drums became sacred objects, symbolizing fertility, protection, or divine connection, and always, drums connected us across language barriers, generations, and worlds, back when there were no clocks, electricity, or writing. Rhythm was how we counted and felt time. Drums brought sound to life. They made time tangible, and in every beat, we found not just music, but meaning. When humans left caves for cities, music evolved from survival ritual to fine art. Nowhere shows this better than ancient Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, where rivers carved kingdoms and writing was born. Here, music got fancy, among temples and ziggurats. We find the first drawings of stringed instruments, harps and lyres etched on clay tablets, carved on walls, even buried with kings. This isn't some cheap bone flute you sneak around with. These babies were crafted with care, decked out in gold, silver, and lapis lazuli. Their curves are as smooth as the sounds they make. The harp especially became the poster child for class. Religion and royalty just a wooden string thing, but legendary nonetheless. Early harps had no frets or fingerboards. You plucked each string by hand, each note fixed in place. But hey, that gave them a special kind of musical vibe. Mesopotamian harps didn't blare like drums. They whispered. The sound floated like incense, holy and dreamy. In these cities, music got organized. Musicians actually trained for their gigs. Scales and intervals were documented meticulously. Harps played roles in rituals, storytelling, even astronomy, as scholars mapped stars and matched them to harmonies. Believing the sky itself hummed celestial tunes. Finding a harp in a Mesopotamian burial, big deal. It meant music was thought to follow the soul beyond death. Not just entertainment, but spiritual architecture, a bridge between worlds. Unlike booming drums or wild flutes, the harp brought something new, intimacy, soft, thoughtful, deliberate, maybe for the first time. Sound wasn't just for gods or tribes. It was for reflection, with a stretched string and wooden frame. Mesopotamians made silence speak loud, birthing civilization's first melodies. In ancient Egypt, music wasn't just art, it was divine language. Egyptians believed music was a gift from the gods. Legend says it was the goddess Bat, later merged into Hathor, goddess of joy, fertility, and music, who first brought song to the world. So music became more than tunes. It was ritual, identity, and spiritual architecture echoing through temples, tombs, and markets. Unlike prehistoric flutes or Mesopotamian ceremonial harps. Egyptian music mixed sacred precision with everyday life. Workers sang to keep rhythm building pyramids, fishermen crooned by the Nile, priests chanted sacred hymns, women strummed lyres, frame drums and rattles marked births and funerals the bookends of life. Egypt's most famous instruments: harps, lutes, lyres, cymbals, and flutes. Harps evolved from simple angular shapes to large, curved, ornately decorated beasts with gracefully arched necks, status symbols, and sound machines. Some had up to 22 strings, crafted so finely their colors still show in tomb paintings after 3,000 years. The sistrum had a special role, a rattle with metal rods clinking when shaken, closely tied to goddess worship, especially Hathor and Isis. Sound wasn't just for fun, it woke the gods, scared off evil, and guarded souls in ceremonies. Egyptian musicians weren't always average Joes. Some were priests or priestesses, serving temples with music. Others performed court gigs for pharaohs and foreign dignitaries, singing praises of gods, kings, and legacies. Music was also a bridge funeral songs and spells guided souls through the underworld. Wealthy tombs even had song lyrics and illustrations of instruments and musicians, making sure the dead had a soundtrack in the afterlife. For ancient Egyptians, music was eternal. It honored gods, united people, and reminded them of cosmic order. The rhythm of Ma'at wasn't chaos, it was the universe's heartbeat. In Egypt, making music meant echoing the sacred for ancient Greeks. Music wasn't just art, it was the soul and universe's science. While other civilizations used music for rituals and festivals, the Greeks dug deeper. Why does sound move us? And the answer wasn't just in poetry or philosophy, but math. Meet Pythagoras, best known today for his triangle theorem, but also a key player in music theory's origin story. Legend says he passed a blacksmith's shop and noticed something weird. The hammer sounds changed with their size and weight. Inspired, he experimented with strings. He found that dividing strings by simple ratios, like 1-2, 2-3, or 3-4, made harmonious, pleasant sounds. This sparked the idea of the music of the spheres, the belief that the universe operates on math ratios and music echoes cosmic order. Each plucked string wasn't just a note, it was a mirror of the sky. Greek instruments reflected this philosophy. The lyre, a small harp-like instrument, became a symbol of civilization and education. Poets like Homer and Sappho were often pictured holding one. The aulos, a double flute, brought wild sounds. Emotional contrasts played out in drama, rituals, and sometimes battlefields. Music in Greece was deeply tied to ethics and character. Philosopher Plato believed different tunes shaped the soul. Some stirred courage, others laziness or chaos. He pushed for strict music education to craft ideal citizens. According to him, picking the wrong music was worse than bad government. But for the Greeks, music wasn't just entertainment, it was medicine, morals, and vibrating mathematical perfection through flesh, skin, and air. They laid down the foundations of music theory, notation systems, and acoustics. Their understanding of intervals, scales, and harmony echoed through Roman times, the Middle Ages, and even into the modern era. In Greece, music was more than just sound. It was the bridge between reason and emotion, numbers and beauty, where the soul both calculated and soared. If Greece gifted music philosophy, Rome gave it volume. In the Roman world, music was all about function, form, and power. It came with festivals, religious rituals, gladiator fights, and most famously, the battlefields. Where Greeks saw music as a link to the divine, Romans treated it as a tool of order and empire. One of Rome's power icons, the cornu, a giant G-shaped brass horn taller than the soldier carrying it. The cornu wasn't for tunes, it was for orders. Its blast signaled troop movements, attacks, and retreats amid the chaos of war. Roman generals didn't just shout, they orchestrated battles. Alongside the cornu was the tuba, not your modern tuba, a straight horn that could cut through battlefield noise. These two horns made the Roman army the most disciplined force on earth. Marching in lockstep, picture tens of thousands of soldiers stepping in time to haunting, majestic brass blasts. Not just organization, psychological warfare, but Roman music wasn't all about war. In temples, tibiae pairs of flutes accompanied sacred ceremonies. In the arena, music kicked off gladiator matches like an ancient national anthem. Before sports events and banquets, lyres and hydraulis, a primitive water-powered pipe organ, set the mood for honored guests. Music flowed in Roman daily life like wine, structured, performed, and important. They borrowed loads from the Greeks, but twisted it to fit their own vibe. Where Greece stressed personal expression and reflection, Rome pushed public performance and control. Music was both entertainment and propaganda, and when Rome absorbed Egypt, Judea, Gaul, and beyond, it soaked up their sounds too. Roman music became a mosaic, blending African rhythms, Eastern melodies, and Mediterranean instruments into something vast and ever-changing. Yet unlike Greek philosophers, Roman thinkers rarely wrote about music theory. They played it, used it, paraded to it, but seldom analyzed it. For Rome, sound was a tool, not a mystery. Ultimately, Rome didn't refine music, it amplified it so even the farthest provinces heard the empire's drums, while the West marched to empire beats. The East explored something else, the soul of sound in ancient India. Music wasn't just art, it was a path to the divine. Deeply rooted in the Vedas, some of the oldest sacred texts ever. Indian music started with chants. The Samaveda, in particular, is a collection of hymns meant not just to be read but sung. These chants followed complex melodic patterns called saman, intended to raise consciousness and harmonize the universe. As Indian civilization grew, so did its instruments. The veena, an ancient stringed instrument, is linked to Saraswati, goddess of knowledge and arts. The mridangam, a barrel-shaped drum, keeps rhythm in sacred performances. Every note, every beat ties into ragas and talas, melodic and rhythmic frameworks believed to evoke emotions, times of day, even spiritual states. Music wasn't for fun. It was discipline, meditation, a way to balance inner energy and touch eternity. Meanwhile, ancient China saw music as sacred, but also political. The legendary Emperor Shun, one of the mythical 5 emperors, supposedly harmonized his empire through music. Chinese philosophy, especially Confucianism, believed proper music led to moral behavior and social order. The right notes created harmony, not just in souls but in the state. Instruments were carefully crafted to reflect cosmic balance. The guqin, a 7-string zither, was played solo by scholars and sages. Its gentle, thoughtful tones expressed introspection and virtue. The sheng, a mouth-blown pipe organ, symbolized unity through multiple pipes working together. The bianzhong, a set of bronze bells, was used in court to mark hierarchy and ritual structure. Chinese music was tuned to precise mathematical intervals aligned with natural cycles, helping humans harmonize with heaven and earth in both India and China. Music wasn't separate from life, it was life itself, a mirror of the universe, a rulebook of discipline, a sacred heartbeat. While Rome used music to conquer, the East used it to connect with gods, nature, and the self, from bone flutes in Paleolithic caves to shimmering strings in Mesopotamia, from Egyptian divine instruments to Chinese zithers soothing emperors. Music has never been just background noise. It's a borderless language, a power older than empires and tougher than all of them combined. But why does music stick around when so many other inventions fade away? Because it hits that weird, unexplainable spot, the emotional core of our souls. It comforts, warns, excites, connects, and mourns. Music is the lullaby for a crying baby, the drumbeat when words fail, the anthem before battle or game day. Music is pure instinct. A tune from the Andes can move someone in Africa. A Polynesian drumbeat feels oddly familiar to a Viking. It's not the notes we recognize, it's the feelings they carry. Music is a master of disguise. It adapts, absorbs, and survives colonization, migration, war, and revolution. Instruments cross oceans, songs change languages, scales morph, but the core stays the same: rhythm, and tone, and expression through history. We've used music to claim identity. Tribes, nations, religions, revolutions, they all have their own soundtrack, but we also use music to break identity down, to cooperate, and to connect. Music doesn't need a shared language. It just needs ears and a heart willing to listen. Modern science now backs what ancient wisdom already knew. Music changes brainwaves, reduces stress, and sparks memories. Alzheimer's patients may lose words, but not the tunes. Soldiers heal from trauma through sound. Babies respond to lullabies before they can even talk. We turn music into therapy, protest, worship, business, life, in a world divided by language, belief, and geography. Music remains one of the rare common threads, the human mark left by ancestors who blew into bird bones and tapped rhythms on stone. No matter how far AI, space travel, or science advance, music reminds us where we came from. It reminds us we're not machines. We're creatures who feel, think, and dream. And as long as we're breathing, we'll keep making music, because before stories, there were sounds, and those sounds made us who we are.